Caledonia Works is a third-party developer known for bringing some very unique and little-known British steam locomotives to Train Simulator, and generally making high-quality locomotives that are also fun to drive, which is more than I can say for the New Zealand Railway's KB class, as much as I like the look of our 484s with the streamlining removed. Today, I wanted to look at one of those obscure locomotives, and I had never even heard of this one until I found out she was coming to TS. This is the Caledonian Railway 600 class 080, of which 8 examples were built between 1901 and 1903. Even though I could have reviewed a more recent add-on, such as the Great Western Railway 1361 class 060 saddle tank, I still chose the 600 class out of personal preference. For this video, I decided to record nearly all of the footage on just 3 routes, namely Marsdenshire, from Just Trains, Western Lines of Scotland by Keith Ross, and the Esthwaite branch by Robert McGregor, if I'm not mistaken. Out of those 3 routes, 2 of them are payware and available on Steam, although I got my copy of Marsdenshire from Just Trains' website. Meanwhile, the Esthwaite branch was a freeware route I downloaded from the now closed UK TrainSim website. The 600 class was first released on the Digital Traction website in April 2018, but she has since migrated over to the dedicated Caledonia Works website. At the normal price, this add-on costs £13 or $26.68 NZD. This is at the cheaper end of CW's pricing, and their more recent add-ons, such as the LMS Princess Royal Pacific, now cost upwards of £20. I managed to get the Princess Royal for 25% off in a flash sale, and she cost me £18.75, or $40.15 NZD. Granted, that's still pretty expensive, but I thought the discount was still reasonable. And incidentally, I've got older Hornby models of 46203 Princess Margaret Rose and 46212 Duchess of Kent, and this was a type of locomotive that I had wanted to see in TS Classic for ages. But I'll return to discussing the Scottish 060 instead of getting sidetracked with Stania Pacifics. But I will add that the Princess Royal pack does not include number 6202, otherwise known as the Turbo Motive. You don't really get a whole lot of stuff in this pack, just the 600 class in Caledonian Railway Goods Black and pre-1927 LMS Plain Black liveries, as those are the only liveries the real engines ever carried. You also get a heavily weathered version of the LMS livery, plus a 30-ton coal wagon and a 6-wheel brake van. The rolling stock is also supplied in both Caledonian and LMS liveries. The 600s were designed primarily for freight service, but that doesn't stop me from occasionally using this thing to haul coaches. Now I don't know about you, but to me, the 600 looks like an evolution of the 294 and 812 class 060s, as well as, to a lesser extent, the 34 class 260. Looking around the 600 in-game, we can see that she looks like an absolute unit, and indeed I do generally like the look of this thing. But one thing I don't understand is the weird spacing of the driving wheels. It reminds me of the New Zealand Railway's OA class, even though that was a one-off Baldwin-built 280, as opposed to an 080 built at St. Rollox. Important features on the model include animated valve gear in between the frames and an animated reverser rod. I also thought that the rod in the middle of the air pump moved as well, but it turns out that I was wrong. I also like the 3D numbers on the number plate, although the lettering round the outside, as opposed to the two trailer park girls round the outside, is just a flat 2D texture. And let's not forget the elaborate lining on the goods black livery. I wouldn't have thought that freight engines were worthy of such fancy liveries. But then again, I know very little about the Caledonian Railway. Another important feature on the 600 is performance mode. It's activated by pressing Shift and P on the keyboard, while it switches off shadows and point lights in order to reduce lag on less powerful computers. I still use it out of habit, even though I've had a decently powerful PC since August 2022. Because the 600 is an older CW product with less advanced scripting, she doesn't have low and max options for performance mode. You'll find those on more recent CW products, such as the LSWR Adams Radial Tank and GWR King Class 460. When you're driving the 600, it's important to note that the process for driving this locomotive isn't exactly the same as normal steam locomotives in TS Classic. Going off what I read in the manual, the locomotive has a saturated boiler, as opposed to superheated, and it takes a bit of getting used to, but it's relatively easy once you get the hang of it. I won't go into every driving detail mentioned in the manual, but I will add that you should leave the regulator at between 50 and 58% once you've gone past 25 miles per hour, and have the reverser at 40% or less. Mr. Wilson says in the manual, "I know it's weird, but this is how they are driven." The sounds on this locomotive couldn't be recorded from the real thing, because none of these fascinating machines have survived into preservation. According to the product listing on CW's website, the sounds were instead recorded from the preserved 812 class 060 at the Strathspey Railway. Sadly, the Caledonian Railway's motive power fared very badly in preservation, with only 3 locomotives from that company surviving the cutter's torch. The engines in question are 439 class 044 tank number 419, 812 class 060 number 828, famously the basis for Donald and Douglas, and lastly, the one-off 422 number 123. As far as I know, 419 and 828 are in operational condition, while 123 is on static display at Glasgow's Riverside Museum. As an aside, and although I really don't mean to sound like a fanboy, I'm very impressed by Mr. Wilson's efforts in 3D modelling and livery making. I can only imagine how difficult it would have been to sort out the lining on the more elaborate liveries. For reference, these 2 locomotives are the North Eastern Railway 1001 class 060 and Great Eastern Railway L77 class 062 tank. The 600 class also comes with accurate Caledonian and LMS lamps, and the head codes can be changed by pressing the H key and cycling through the 3 options, or Shift plus H to cycle backwards. A pop-up in the top right corner tells you what type of service each head code is for. Strangely, Caledonian engines never had lamp irons on the running board, and I don't know why the 600 only has 3 header code options. I also like the varied camera views, which can be accessed by pressing the left or right arrow keys after you press 1 to enter the footplate view. My favourite is the one where you're on the right hand side of the boiler, because you can look down on the animated valve gear. Thinking back to the footplate, this is very well modelled, complete with little details like the flask of tea and a smoking pipe on this plate just above the firebox door. I don't consider myself to be an absolute expert on steam locomotives, especially seeing as my name isn't Heiss, and I don't know what every single one of these levers does. Incidentally, the one time I got to drive a real steam locomotive, I was only given control of the regulator, reverser, and brakes, not even the whistle. Despite being a big 080 tender engine, the 600s were only given a power rating of 4F by the LMS. For comparison, another 080 that we've got in TS, specifically the London and North Western Railway G2 class, aka Super D, got a power rating of 7F under British Railways. So, in other words, the 600 is deceptively weak despite its sheer size, and this would be like if a locomotive as big as the 9F class 210 only had a power rating of 3F like the LMS Ginty. Incidentally, I still haven't got the Victory Works 9F at the time of uploading. Just like what I did with the GT3 gas turbine locomotive, I also ran the 600 on the ancient test track route to work out to absolute top speed. As stated earlier, this thing only had a power rating of 4F, so I wasn't expecting any crazy fast speeds from her. In the end, I couldn't get her to go any faster than 57.8 miles per hour. When it comes to steam locomotives in TS Classic, I prefer those that aren't bogged down with stupidly advanced features, such as the 600 class and other engines made by Digital Traction or Caledonia Works. The engines that do have advanced features, like the LNWR Super D and New Zealand Railway's KB class, are very harder to drive, and consequently frustrating for people who just want something more simple. CW's products are just as easy to drive as they are high quality, especially if Mr. Wilson's modelling skills are anything to go by.